This week's episode is brought to you by Sukkot Giving, TC Jew Folks' fall event on Sunday, November 3rd from 5 to 7 p.m. at Bethel Synagogue. This event is a beautiful and delicious celebration of the American Jewish experience, and nothing says American Jewish experience more to us than the all too familiar juggling we do in the moments between the high holidays and Thanksgiving. The beauty and crossover of fall, the harvest, and the focus on gratitude isn't lost on us. This is going to be a beautiful evening with a gorgeous catered, kosher, vegetarian, and dairy fall meal, live music with The Long Honeymoon, a grounding moment with Rabbi Jill Averin from Your Jewish, small gifts for any children present from PJ Library, and a meaningful moment and gift for all in attendance with local artist Robin Awend. It is going to be a delight. Tickets are on sale now, so to learn more and get your tickets, go to bit.ly/SukkotGiving. That's bit.ly/SukkotGiving to get your tickets today. Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jew Folk. This week I talked to Rabbi Eva Cohen, the newly ordained and now spiritual leader of Or Emet, the Minnesota Congregation for Humanistic Judaism. We talk about what Humanistic Judaism is, what led her to the pulpit, and what it's like leading a congregation that's known her for almost 30 years on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Rabbi Eva Cohen, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you. Really glad to be here.
You are the newly ordained, or at least recently ordained rabbi, and you are working at Or Emet, the Minnesota Congregation for Humanistic Judaism. So first of all, mazel tov on the accomplishment.
Thank you.
I guess for starters, I was telling you before we started recording, I have some familiarity of Humanistic Judaism. I'm from the Detroit area, which is where Humanistic Judaism started, or at least got its roots in, modern Judaism at the Birmingham Temple in Michigan. Tell me a little bit about what Humanistic Judaism is for those who may not know.
Sure. Yeah, so Humanistic Judaism is a movement within Judaism. I guess you could think of the denominational spectrum, Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, humanistic. We're like the fifth column, right? No, I'm joking. But we are a movement within Judaism that is non-theistic, that instead really focuses on affirming human power and human responsibility to make a positive difference in the world, independent of supernatural authority. And so I think what we're interested in doing is, maintaining continuity and maintaining connection with Jewish tradition where that works for us, where it's culturally meaningful, and the things we're doing and saying are not in conflict with a non-theistic worldview, but then in places where there is conflict, traditional blessing language, other things like that don't work for us. We transform it to express our positive humanistic ethos.
Okay. So that gets into some, I may as well ask it now. I was definitely going to, how do the blessings work? Because obviously I'm guessing every other of the movements of Judaism, it's Baruch Atah Adonai.
Exactly.
What happens at Or Emet on a Shabbat evening?
Sure. Yeah, so like just to give you an example, like our candle blessing, we would say Baruch Haor Ba'olam, Baruch Haor Ba'adam, Baruch Haor Ba'Shabbat. So blessed is the light within the world, blessed is the light within each person, blessed is the light of Shabbat. So yeah, we are blessing the things that we believe in and find inspirational.
Okay. What was it about Humanistic Judaism that appealed to you growing up? Where did the connection to it come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I grew up in the humanistic Jewish movement, which is y- you could say isn't necessarily unusual. I mean, there are plenty of people who come to this movement as adults
Hmm.
from other streams of Judaism or other streams of humanism or secular humanism. But you know, there are some people who grow up in this and stay in this, and I guess I'm an example of one of those people. So clearly, it was resonant for me.
Hmm.
I mean, I think thinking about my so like my family's history in terms of like my Jewish family, I come from like a long line of secular Jews, people who were you know, very passionate about Jewishness and Jewish culture, but in a secular way, in a non-religious way. Kind of, I guess, if you think about like sort of the Yiddish left, New York City, like that context.
Sure.
And you know, growing up, you know, my parents were interested in, you know, giving me and my sister like a secular Jewish education. And Or Emet was kind of the closest fit for that. And I think I found growing up in the community, it was like very meaningful to me to be able to you know, connect with the things about Jewishness that I find very moving and meaningful and inspirational, you know, just to give an example, you know, Passover, a holiday that, you know, we look at the stats as maybe like the most celebrated Jewish holiday,
Yep.
you know, to be able to, you know, having a Passover Seder with my family, but also like a community Seder with Or Emet congregation and, you know, um, learning to, you know, sing the four questions in our children's school and, you know, making, you know, heroisis with my dad. He says it the Yiddish way, you know, things like that. And connecting with sort of the holiday message of I guess really like themes of like liberation and this idea of you know, pursuing justice and freedom for all people, being able to do that in a way that felt really continuous with my heritage and, you know, all my ancestors who were people who very much stood up for justice and for freedom, but doing it in a way that you know, I'm not praying to a God I don't believe in or saying things that don't feel um yeah, compatible with like my understanding of the world. So yeah, to be able to affirm everything that was positive and meaningful about that like long of tradition line of tradition, but then yeah,
Hmm.
transforming it. Um and then I guess something I could say also is thinking about like humanistic Judaism as a denomination, it is like framing itself as like I guess like it's a congregational model. It is taking sort of like the synagogue model, which is different from when you think of other secular Jewish movements kind of through history, you know, and over the last couple of 100 years, a lot of secular Jewishness was about like drawing a sharp line and saying, you know, okay, that's, you know, religious Judaism, that's, you know, synagogue Judaism, that's over there. We're rejecting that. And I think humanistic Judaism is looking to sort of achieve almost like a synthesis, like taking secular Jewish ideology and approaches, but then taking everything that we find like valuable about a synagogue model in terms of creating community and offering lots of opportunity, like for group ritual
Right.
that positively reinforces what we believe and, you know, brings people together.
I think I get all of that. I also think that there's, as sort of younger people come into the congregational models, my sense of it, and it's solely my sense, and I could be totally wrong, but I think that people are sort of taking what they like from different pieces of Judaism, and that is how that, you know, whether it's a little bit of camp, a little bit of synagogue life, a little bit of secular life, and that is how they're sort of devising their own sense of Judaism at home. And I think
Right.
that's that in and of itself, in the more mainstream movements is different now than it was, say, 50 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you are right. Thinking about that as like a larger trend. And yeah, maybe yeah, more comfort with kind of like intentionally like remixing and resampling and there being like maybe more institutional endorsement of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I guess in some ways you could say that Rabbi Sherwin Wine, who was the founder of the humanistic Jewish movement, like in the 1960s, was like a little bit ahead of the curve. Like him and his community, they were like, hey, okay, we like this, but all this other stuff is not working for us. How do we totally reimagine this to be, yeah, like a positive form of Judaism that we're going to connect with?
Based on your knowledge of the denomination, where were people coming from? What was the draw for other folks that you've met and worked with through this process?
I think it's an interesting mix. There are some people who are coming from very religious Jewish contexts, like people who grew up Orthodox and who found like a lot of like had some kind of a like a theological crisis or like reached this point where um or following the halacha like it felt very much not right to them.
Sure.
And then, I think sometimes, totally left all things Jewishness, but then, we're maybe looking for a way to re-engage that would feel compatible. Other people who, maybe grew up in like, less religious, but still more establishment streams of Judaism, in the conservative movement or in the reform movement, but who either maybe they went to Hebrew school but at home the
Mhm.
way they thought about things was a little bit different, or something, an interesting theme that comes up a lot is people talk about, we'll say, we're coming up on the high holidays and we think about, the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac.
Mhm.
I've had a number of people over the years tell me, and then this is something I've read, other people in the humanistic Jewish movement talk about, that that particular story like planted the seed of doubt for them, like this idea that God would tell a father to sacrifice his son, like as a demonstration of obedience. And, what, however we try to interpret that out or interpret that away, you're, oh, well, this is in this biblical context, like, they're showing that they reject child sacrifice because at the last minute, God waives it, or, like all the other interpretive stuff we can do. For a lot of people, that was sort of a critical
Sure.
moment for them when they first understood that story. And then, yeah, there's other people who come from, like I talked about, some of my family from, secular Jewish kinds of contexts, secular Yiddishism, things like that. And then we also have, plenty of folks who come, not from the Jewish world originally, but people who, you know, sometimes who grew up religious Christian or religious other traditions, and then as adults move toward humanism, but we're looking for maybe something more specific and something that felt more culturally rich. Sometimes folks who, yeah, married a Jewish person, or have members of their chosen family that are Jewish, and that drew them to this. And, I'd say like the majority of my congregation, if I think about couples or families, are interfaith, or
Oh, sure.
sometimes we use the term interfaithless in our community, but yeah,
Oh, interesting.
intercultural
Yeah.
families.
So, what was it that drew you to the rabbinate? Because I mean, we was looking back at your Who the Folk interview with my predecessor here at Jew Folk in the written, when it was in its written form, but you were a visual art and anthropology major in school.
Yeah.
So, what was it that put you on the path to the rabbinate?
Well, let's see. So I graduated from college, from undergraduate in 2009. So, think like recession
Yeah.
and yeah, kind of a hard time to find a job. I was, interested in doing my art, doing nonprofit work. I had a lot of different kinds of, part-time jobs and stuff that I did in like a freelance capacity. But one of the things I did, and I guess, yeah, thinking about that interview back in 2015, that was done when I was working as the Or Emet's, our Jewish cultural Sunday school director.
Yep.
And that was like something that initially I was like, okay, I'm going to take this on as a part-time job because I need another part-time job. But then, in doing the work, I became, I think, really more and more passionate and like mission driven around this idea that it's like really important for humanistic Jewish congregations, and I'd say more broadly for secular and humanistic Jewish spaces to exist so that people who, want to connect with Jewishness in a non-theistic way have like a community home. And I think I found, a lot of the kids I worked with and the families that I worked with, and then, really people all across the age span talked about not feeling like they had a place anywhere else. Lots of people saying, like, if I had known this existed 20 years ago, this would have changed my life. So I think, yeah, feeling more and more um, like I wanted to be part of work to help make this kind of community available and vital for
Hmm.
people who, were this not available, there would be really no Jewish community space for them. And then I think too, yeah, in doing that work and also teaching in the school, like I was doing more and more Jewish learning myself and getting more and more excited about that. And I think, the idea of moving forward professionally, training to become a rabbi, to do, work that would help to enrich and like uplift and, promote the continuity of this congregation, while getting to, learn about and teach about and, write about all of this stuff that was so interesting and exciting to me and that I
Hmm.
felt like could be positively inspirational for people. All of that was interesting. And I think too, something I like about the work of a rabbi is it's in a funny there's this like, I mean, kind of like the pre-modern, like, Jack or Jill of all trades. Like it's like,
Sure.
oh, you're a ceremonialist, and like also you're going to counsel someone who's been through this really tough thing, and like now you're going to like go give advice, yeah, on this almost, like a some kind of dispute, and now you're teaching kids how to write the alphabet, and now you're, like that whole mix, it kind of appeals to me as someone who I have a lot of different interests and I like doing a lot of different things. I don't like having every day be the same.
Sure.
Um,
No, I think there's something fascinating, and this is any this is something I think about any rabbi I've ever encountered. But the idea that like you finish school and you're ordained, and then you become a rabbi, and then you're just the go-to person for anything that your congregation may wonder. It feels like very surreal in a certain way. Like that is a lot of power to be entrusted with already.
right. No, I mean you're there, and yeah, I think and that sometimes I'm like, I don't think you should be asking me this. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, and then part of my role is saying, like, you need to consult the appropriate authority who is not me.
Listen, it's good that you know the line though, right? It's good that you know what what to when to sort of bring in or direct them to somebody maybe more qualified.
Totally. And yeah, and I think, like as like great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
Like for me, I'm not excited about I didn't want to do this because like, oh, this would give me the chance to have power over people. Like I want to be very careful and intentional about
Yeah.
like how I am using my influence in a way that is uplifting everyone else. And I think too, like in humanistic Judaism, like we're not seeing ourselves as like halachically bound, so I don't have the same, authority as like an arbiter of, this is how you should behave or this is how you should not behave in terms of X or Y or Z ritual thing. But, more being in a role of, I guess, partner and thinking about ethical kinds of
Sure.
concerns.
Sure. What's it like not just being a rabbi? And obviously there's some, I'm sure, surrealness about having the title and starting in this role, but also doing it at your home congregation where you grew up. What's that like?
That is interesting because yeah, there's still like there's a lot of people who are part of the congregation who knew me when I was 9 years old. I guess I reached my adult height at age 12, so I wasn't that much shorter, but yeah,
Oh
I was
no.
younger. And and yeah, there is a funny thing with that, like, oh, okay, that's nice, but I do think the fact that I have been, over the years, kind of slowly growing into this leadership role and always in, full partnership and dialogue with the congregation. The people who 10 years ago, maybe, the first thing in their mind was, yeah, 9-year-old Eva. Now it's like they've had 10 years of seeing me, slowly step into this position. For like 4 years before I was ordained, I was acting as the congregation's ritual leader. So kind
Mhm.
of doing the job of a rabbi without the full training and title. So I think, yeah, over time, I've been able to, I think, shift people's dominant picture just
Yeah.
because new stuff has accumulated.
No, mindsets have to change that. I mean, otherwise, I mean, if they don't, it becomes, I'm not gonna say impossible, but certainly very difficult for you to do your job if people don't, if they're always gonna think of you as, the 12-year-old, that's gonna be really tough.
Right.
What's the what's the rabbinic history like? I know obviously it's in being a newer denomination. How many full-time rabbis have there been?
In terms of full time, not so many. In
Okay,
terms of part time, more.
sure.
Yeah, there's so the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism is the institution for our movement that
Okay.
trains rabbis, and I think, let's see, there's been, like, in terms of people who have come out of that program, I don't know, 20 some. There's other rabbis in the movement, I guess, well, like our founder Sherwin Wine,
Yeah,
who trained in other movements, like, reform rabbis who, yeah, maybe had, what we could call a crisis of faith, or, a
sure.
profound shift in their understanding, who've come to our movement later. um and then, in Israel, we have like a sister institution called
Oh,
Tamura Yisrael, and they have at this point trained, I think, around 30
okay.
rabbis.
Okay. So I mean it's a fairly small community of rabbis, but also being the youngest of the denominations, that's not, doesn't seem terribly surprising either.
Right. And we also, something that I think has been important in humanistic Judaism, yeah, because we are a young denomination, a lot of our congregations are smaller, like
Right.
our membership, we're committed to making things affordable, having dues lower. Like a lot of our congregations are lay led, or are led by a term we use in the movement is, led by a madrich or a madricha.
Oh, sure.
My understanding is in other Jewish movements, that's like the word for a camp counselor, like your Jewish camp counselor. So a little different here, but yeah,
A little
like
bit.
a lay leader who has some training, but not
Okay.
to the level of a rabbi. And Or Emet for many years was led by one of our co-founders, Madrich Harold Launder, who was very passionate about humanistic Judaism. And his day job, he was an oncologist.
Oh,
And he,
that's a
yeah, he,
very different job.
right? uh but yeah, so somebody who was, yeah, smart and passionate. And as he was moving into retirement, we had conversations around succession, what happened, what was going to happen next, and that was
Sure.
part of what informed my decision. And he, unfortunately passed away in 2020.
Mm.
So yeah, may his memory be a blessing. And yeah, I think he was always very supportive of me stepping into this role. And that's something I appreciated.
So as you're getting ready to lead your first high holidays as ordained rabbi, and again, putting together our annual high holiday guide, I have seen your name for a number of years as ritual leader. And now obviously the title changes, the responsibilities change. What what are you most looking forward to now that you have the title to go with what you're doing?
Hmm. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, because in a lot of ways, it feels like a subtle change because, yeah, as you said, I've been leading the services for many years as ritual leader. I think like the way I guess I'm thinking about it is it's like my own expectations for myself and the congregation's expectations for me are probably like a little bit higher. So I'm like, okay, gotta really like make this as professional as I can, like I gotta, like okay, my Kol Nidre sermon, like gotta like, really pump up the volume,
Elevated a little bit.
right? And yeah, I guess thinking back like last year, so for our Rosh Hashanah service, my sermon or my talk was the Ten Commandments of Barbie. So taking like the Barbie film as like the
Yes.
starting point, and then and that was something that like I had a lot of fun with. People really resonated with it. We had a lot of interesting conversations about
Mhm.
feminism and like LGBTQ issues and that came out of that. And so I'm right now I'm working on what's going to be for this year, and it needs to be as good as that or better. And stay tuned.
All right. Well, can't wait to hear what it ends up being. Last couple of questions, and we will let you get back to those preparations. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Hmm. Let's see. And this is going to be like a characteristic my kind of answer. It's very hard for me to choose one thing.
Okay,
um, I'll
listen,
say
I understand.
okay. Yeah, maybe I'd say so Passover, like I talked about, I'd say
Yeah,
tied between Passover and the larger high holidays. I think in terms of Passover, yeah, the food, the framework, it's like this perfect like mix of like ritual that's like educative and like formative, but also fun, the music, the symbols, and that like undergirding theme of liberation, of like struggle for human liberation. I find all that very meaningful. And then I think the high holidays, from a like a humanistic Jewish perspective, really thinking about this as a time for um careful like self-reflection, self-improvement, improving our relationships with other people, thinking about what we can do um in the to improve the world, um and having that all be in the human realm, and this like annual opportunity to really think carefully about that,
sure.
I find inspiring.
Oh, that's great. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
Let's see. And that's funny. I think when I was asked this question like almost 10 years ago, um, I think I said Humintashen, and
Yes,
I'm
yes,
like
yes,
I'm
you did. That's correct.
revising my answer.
That's
Let's see.
totally
So
fine.
I evolved on the issue. Let's see. I think well in this like I think there's discourse in the humanistic Jewish community, and I think other Jewish communities too, about like Ashkenormativity and like
Sure.
assuming like, the Ashkenazi thing is the Jewish thing when there's a whole lot of variety.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean my Jewish heritage is Ashkenazi, and yeah, I love a good potato latke, I love a good
Oh,
hamantaschen,
yeah.
but I think yeah, I don't know. In recent years, I've been really excited to learn more about Sephardic and like Mizrahi cooking.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite cookbooks is Jerusalem by Yotam Adolengi,
Ottolenghi.
and
Yes.
yeah, Sami Tamimi, and it's yeah collaboration between um, yeah an Israeli Jewish and an Israeli Palestinian chef, and some yeah really wonderful dishes in there, including sabich, which is like a it's like eggplant and egg and kind of, Middle Eastern salad, and then like Yemenite Jewish, like spicy sauce that might be up there.
You lost me at eggplant, but I know plenty of people who absolutely cannot get enough of that. And that is an answer I don't often get. So I appreciate people who branch out and put new ideas out there to answer that question. It's always it always is it's not as wide a range of answers as I would hope to get, but it's an interesting array, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess, yeah, now Sadiq has entered the building.
That's fantastic. Rabbi Eva Cohen at Or Emet congregation, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck leading your first high holiday services as the rabbi of the congregation you grew up in.
Oh, thanks so much. Great speaking with you.
The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.